Okay, I think we got it. And we'll get going. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Source Generative Art Lecture Series. I'm Lauren Lee McCarthy. I'm a co-director of social software along with Casey Reese. I'm also a professor in the Department of UCLA Design Media Arts. Let me just share my slides, my very brief slide here. Okay, hopefully, Mitchell, can you see that?
I can.
Okay, great. So just a quick intro before I hand it over. For the source series, we asked each artist to share their story. So right now it's a series of three lectures, and there was a specific format. So we asked them to share how they began working with generative art, the projects that define their practice, and what they're exploring now. And then after the presentation, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A. And I'm really thrilled to have the honor of hosting Mitchell Chan today. Before we jump into that lecture, I wanted to mention that next week we're presenting the source lecture for Martin Grasser, which will be hosted by Jeff Davis of the Generative Art Foundation. And this one next week will actually be a hybrid lecture. So it will take place at the UCLA Broad Art Center, and also over YouTube. You will be able to stream it. And then last week, we presented the source lecture from Operator that was hosted by Casey, and that's recorded, and we're planning to post all three videos from the lectures when the series is finished. So if you didn't get to catch that last week, stay tuned for the recording. It was really great. Okay, so Source, the lecture series, is co-sponsored by three groups. The first, social software. And in social software, or SoSoft, we collaborate with others to explore code and systems as a medium for creating new forms of art. We respond to the power dynamics, inequities, and biases embedded in the systems that shape our lives. And we really think about software as culture, software as art, and software as something inherently social. We are really grateful to have the support of the Generative Art Foundation for this lecture series, and they are dedicated to elevating generative art in all its forms and promoting creative coding as a meaningful artistic practice. And then finally, the UCLA Department of Design Media Arts is also supporting this. And in this department, we cultivate a comprehensive, multidisciplinary approach to artistic practice that focuses on experimentation and innovation. And exciting news, next fall, we're opening admissions for a brand new computational art BA degree. So stay tuned for more info on that. Okay, so that housekeeping aside, I'm really excited to introduce Mitchell Chan. He's a conceptual artist based in Toronto. Since 2006, he has created innovative new media installations and exhibited them widely. Chan's work often explores shifts in human sensibility in the age of technology, as well as the way art's commodity form can permeate and shape its expressive power. One critic has described Chan as committed to the most serious ideas of conceptualism in the most playful way possible, a characterization he embraces. His foundational blockchain artwork, Digital Zones of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility, was recently exhibited in Monte di Pietà at the Fondazione Prada during the 60th Venice Biennale. And his most recent project, the Zantar Triptych, is a series of real video games set within a fictional video game economy. It premiered at Nguyen Wahed in New York City in 2025 and made its Asian debut at Frieze Seoul with the Sarthe Gallery. On a more personal note, I'm really honored to be hosting Mitchell. It's one of the artists that I really admire, and I think I just appreciate the sense of humor, but also the depth and criticality of the work and the way that these things kind of come together so um, beautifully in every project. So, welcome, Mitchell. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and we're looking forward to hearing your talk. You can feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. And thanks to everybody in the attendee list. I'm really excited for this talk. Um, you know, I do these talks. I see some friendly names over on the attendee list, and I get a little self-conscious sometimes. Just, people gonna wanna be up for my old cheap tricks in another lecture. But I got some exciting news for everybody. I got all new cheap tricks, to paraphrase the great Dr. Peter Venkman. And so I'm really excited about this talk because Lauren and Casey, they asked me to present a breakthrough piece, before like the sort of iconic piece. And so I'm going to present a piece here today that I haven't really lectured on before, not ever, I don't think. And one of the reasons why I've never presented this piece in a lecture is because, to be honest, it's not great. It's like not it's not a great piece. But that's the funny thing about breakthrough pieces, right? It's like the breakthrough piece is the piece where you start to figure it out. And when you're starting to figure it out, that means by definition, you don't have it all figured out just yet. And so that's what I wanted to go through today. And it's really going to walk you through how I came to understand, code as a medium and also code as a subject matter. So I'll start to share my screen and we'll get into it. I guess the first thing I should say is that um, I am Mitchell Chan, and I'm okay at coding. I'm like just kind of okay. I might even be kind of good at this point in my life. And I say that not as like false modesty, like I'm fishing for someone to say, "Oh, shucks, Miss, you're really good. I've seen your GitHub." Like, no, it's the truth. I've worked really hard to be just okay. And that that is fun because I think the thing about art is that like art is not about like if you are the best programmer, you would do well to, I don't know, start a software company and, make something that can change the world and make bags and bags of money. And like, that's great. If you're the best 3D animator, you can get a job at Disney or Pixar and you can work on a team of people and the things you create will be enjoyed by millions of people, right? The job of being an artist is not always being the best at the medium. The job of an artist is to look at the medium and understand the ways that it is transforming society, right? And understand the ways that it is transforming human beings. Um, Proficiency helps. Like if you have a choice between sort of, being insightful and thoughtful about society and technologically proficient versus being insightful and thoughtful about society and being just okay, choose the first one. Like it's better. But the prerequisite is thinking about how this impacts society, and being reflexive about it and expressing that concisely through your artwork. So I'm going to show some work from, I guess it'd be about 13 years ago, and we'll jump into it. So let me just share my screen here. Here we are. I'm screen sharing, and we can confirm. Everyone can see this? Good?
Yep,
Okay,
looks
I'm just
good.
going to assume that was good. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so here's the deal. It's 2002. There was a time when I wasn't even very good at coding or computers, right? This is a time, right? And I was kind of just learning and I was just figuring it out. And this is the first project that I made that used code that was exhibited in a gallery. It was kind of, I guess, my first professional project. And it was 2013, and it was called Sol LeWitt Generator. Now in 2026, the connections between Sol LeWitt, the Fluxus artists, and generative art, it's almost a trite point. It's been said again and again and again, but just for the sake of being thorough, let's just go over it in this talk. And I don't know. Back in 2013, maybe this point had already been made like a whole bunch of times. Maybe it had. I didn't really know. This was just kind of what was coming to me as I was exploring the medium. But the basic idea of it was this, right? Was that Sol LeWitt being probably the most cited example of an artist in the Fluxus group who are interested in art as a set of instructions and the outputs of those instructions being almost incidental, or if not incidental, then of lesser importance than the instructions that are followed to make them. This is a way of placing the real value of the artwork in the conceptualization of it, right? It reinforces the idea of art as this platonic thing that exists in the world of ideas, wherein the physical manifestation of it is but a shadow of that ideation. And so, on one hand, there's a really obvious way that this lines up with the idea of code and art, right? The software that we interact with it's code. That's a series of instructions. What shows up on our screen is not the code, right? It is the output. And here I am. Oh my gosh, like I've opened up P5 for the first time. I'm discovering this awesome world of writing code. And this is my art form now that I've made it through the first tutorial. And that's really exciting. But that actually wasn't the point of what I was trying to do. What I was interested in, beyond just that obvious mapping of idea, like concept and physical manifestation, to code and output, I was really interested in the ways that conceptual art was commodified and the ways that our digital culture wanted to commodify things. So the funny thing about Solowit and all the conceptual artists was that, even though they said it is just the ideas are the art, that's the really important thing. They liked making money. They definitely liked making some money. And so they were selling these ideas. And when you bought a Solowit, you bought a certificate that contained the instructions, the information that was pertinent to the artwork, the information from which the thing could be constructed, and then whatever you did with it was your business, to a degree. You buy the instructions, you get someone to draw it on your museum wall, that's all great. And what was really interesting to me was that we were living in this world in 2013. This was a phrase that was going around a lot in 2013. All right, people were saying information wants to be free. This is around the time, or it's very close to the time, we were all justifying our downloading of music on Napster. And there were, all of these kind of can't we and we were digitizing books, and we wanted copy left instead of copyright. And these were like interesting ideas. It felt like it was a really powerful movement in at that particular time. It still is to some degree now, but I think it was really interesting to me how much that information wants to be free ethos was at odds with what conceptual art was doing 50 years before that, where no, 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 no. In conceptual art, the physical thing that was free. You could make as many of those as you wanted. It was the information that was valuable. And there was this really nice alignment in that, because they thought the idea is what's valuable. Therefore, whatever is the receptacle for the information, whatever is the receptacle of the idea, that is where we will put financial value. And I wondered how these two things could coexist. I wondered if is one of these ethoses correct and one incorrect. So I wanted to kind of put them together, or at least juxtapose them. And I think it's important that we use art to kind of test the prevailing wisdom of the day, and especially kind of some of the more like feel good prevailing wisdom that we want to just take for granted. It sounds good, information wants to be free. um but what happens when we do that? And now I think 13 years later, we can see there were actually a lot of downsides to that attitude, right? We ended up creating a free repository of data that is now largely been monetized by massive corporations, and it ain't going to be free for long, because corporations have found ways to amass all this data and sell it back to us in different packages, and we'll have to subscribe to them. Anyway, I digress. That's just saying why it is important to interrogate these ideas, and it's important to do so through art. So how do I do this? This is the thing that I'm interested in. Layer one is like, oh yeah, code to output. That's just like concept to artwork. That's an interesting analogy. But there's also tension in the ways those things are packaged up and sold. So I made this project called Lewitt Generator. And here's what this was, right? I was thinking about how in the original kind of Saul Lewitt, he just, the instructions are a little plaque somewhere, and then the wall drawing is this big thing. And so I wanted to, write out the code on the wall. And this is a super duper duper simple code. Like I said, it's like I'm not great at coding, but it's okay. I'm just like thinking about the code that I have made. And so you walk in the gallery, and the idea was to invert the model, right? Once I've written this code and I've made, I've put it on like my processing.org homepage, or I've put it on GitHub, those instructions exist, free in some form, right? And the only thing that I can do as an artist, if I want to, profit from this thing, is sell the merch, right? It's actually the physical things have to have value now because we as a society have decided that all the information will be free. And so you come in here and there's the drawing on the wall that can't be moved. But these prints that I made, like the outputs of the sketch, those are for sale. That was what's for sale in the commercial gallery. Um, I tried to reinforce this idea with on the table here. Right. So I had this set up on this iMac. This iMac was out of date even at the time I was doing this in 2013. I think this is like a circa like 2007 iMac. It was just such a beautiful object that had to be part of the exhibit. And it's on this IKEA, on this IKEA table. And so I just put next to each other, there was the instructions for assembling this, the IKEA table, and then I made these mirror instructions for how to assemble like my sketch. And these were just sitting there in the commercial gallery, and you could just take one. You see, they were all signed and they were all numbered, right? And if you opened up the Lewitt instruction book, it had like the IKEA style, like, this is how you do look at your computer and then run the code. You print it out. Don't break it. And if you have questions, just consult the internet. And it had like the full, again, very simple sketch in here. And those were those were the instructions. So what am I doing here? It was, oh, here's a little video. It showed on the iMac. I was running. I just kind of animated this sketch running through a whole bunch of iterations to show that I can spit out as many different versions of this set of instructions for making a drawing. I can spit them out super fast. I can do 100 in a second, whatever, and make it a nice kind of soothing animation. And of course, the ability to spit out multiple different iterations of this will be important in future permutations of the generative art market and critical ecosystem. But anyway, so that was the project, and this was a real breakthrough for me. I said that, I don't talk about this project a lot because it's not a great project. And it's really not. Like, I'm not trying to be humble or falsely modest. Like, there's a lot of ideas out here, and they're a little bit of a mess. And I hadn't yet learned to edit myself out and filter and be concise. But all of a sudden, I was on this bread. I was on this trail of breadcrumbs of understanding different levels on which I could engage with code as art, right? And one, there's the simple similarity of like, oh, okay, all code as art is similar to like instructional, like instruction based or conceptual art or fluxus art or whatever. But secondly, this was, there was a model of like financialization. There was an economic system that was being created, not just in the art world, but in the world, based on how software was distributed and the ways that the internet could distribute soft goods and information-based services and goods. We were really careening toward a world where it's like, if you're a band, right? The only way you're going to make money is selling merch, right? These kind of disruptions to people who made ephemeral, immaterial, intangible things, right? The ways that they could financialize what they did, that was changing. And that was interesting to me. And that was enabled by technology and software. And so, oh my gosh, once software and coding came into my workflow as an artist, that was a whole new world of ideas that I could engage with. So that's all on the table for me right now. Like, that's really interesting. And then, thirdly, one thing that's kind of just starting to emerge and it's not fully developed in this piece right now is like understanding systems. There was something in that animation of making all of those wall drawings animate one after another and have them all um, kind of fuse into each other, where I was realizing, oh, what this is really, really good for is creating a system and then just like iterating through it, like testing, like you can essentially stress test a system that you design. And my understanding of that concept is still really, really in its infancy in this project. But that's what was unlocked for me. And it's all messy. There's like kind of like one too many ideas in there, so they don't read clearly, and none of them are explored to their fullest extent. But it was the breakthrough for me, and it was yeah the first project I presented in a gallery that used code. Yeah, so that was really fun. And I don't think I ever presented that in a lecture, so this was fun, and hopefully that made sense. That would unlock. We'll get to all this later, right? And so in between then and there, I would find some kind of more elegant ways to incorporate technology into my artwork. And I would find that it was really, really valuable. The fact that code remained hidden, the fact that the system remained hidden was actually that was the superpower of software-based art and of coding as art. That's what I was discovering. Um, and once I was figuring that out, it was huge for me. This became a project where I really learned there's, a lot of software that made this project run. And this was kind of my first good artwork. And I learned to hide it all, right? And you only learn to kind of hide that all once you get to the point where like you're a little bit less self-conscious about being such a bad coder and you're like, oh, it's fine, even if I kind of figure something out, I can hide it. I don't need to kind of show off being a clever clogs or anything like that. But it really really gets me going on this pathway of what I hide and what I reveal. So I'm on that highway. Those are just kind of the next steps between that breakthrough piece, and then this piece. And this is a piece that I've lectured on quite a bit. But the scope of this talk was to then kind of talk about what was the iconic work in my history of practice, right? And this was it. So I did that Soloist thing in 2013. And then in 2017, believe it or not, I did not spend all of the intervening years just kind of testing out coding and technology against historic artistic practices. But this does show like a theme in how I encounter new technologies. When I find a new technology that's interesting, I do find it valuable to start testing it against historic ideas and start applying it to the ideas of artists who came before me because that's what an experiment is. An experiment is something new, a variable, and you test it against a control, right? And so if I understand a historic artistic practice, I can cram a new technology into it, and it can help me understand what that technology is or is not. And it can also help me reframe that historic art practice. I'm testing it against the kind of state of the art, cutting edge technology. And I'm finding out if these ideas still hold up or they don't hold up, right? In the instance of making the silhouette, like one of the takeaways from that was that someone had to be wrong. Like either Lewitt and the Fluxus artists were wrong about where value lied um, in in an artwork that had like an information form and a commodity form, like in a physical form, or like society at that time had to be wrong. Both those things couldn't be right. And so when I discovered blockchain in 2017, this is a really interesting technology. I don't fully understand it. And when I say I don't fully understand it, like I don't mean that like I don't understand how to program in Solidity. Although I mean I didn't understand that, but that doesn't matter. Like you can learn that. I didn't understand what it meant in society. I didn't understand what does it mean that our society produced this? What does it mean that all of a sudden now people want to own these imaginary coins, and they're just gonna keep yelling that they're worth something, and that they are. That's so messed up. What does it mean? And so I tested against other artists who have had ideas about where value comes from and about what form it takes. So that was digital zones of immaterial pictorial sensibility. And basically what happened was I this idea, I had some experience thinking about how conceptual artists financialize their work. And it's not because I'm like it's not because I'm like a money obsessed person or anything like that, but it is because like the financialization of the financialization of art is, I think, an underexplored. Uh, Art has this tendency to be self-reflexive about kind of everything except that. And one of the few artists who I think was really honest about the commercial world being a part of how his work was experienced was Yves Klein. I know there are a number of artists who have done this, but they do it like Damien Hirst does it in kind of a douchey way. And Jeff Koons does it in kind of a douchey way. And Klein, I think, did it very sincerely, and with a real sense of purpose and spirituality and faith in his works. So let's give you a quick rundown of this. Yves Klein, just in case you're not aware, or we need a refresher. Yves Klein, most famous for he made paintings. They were blue. They were really blue. They were like a super special blue. That was his shtick. That was his deal. He did some other stuff, but the blue stuff, that was mostly his shtick. But what Klein really believes, and this is, by the way, Klein actually does predate the Fluxus artists a little bit. He would become aligned with that movement, but he was really at the leading edge of this. And so this exhibition I'm talking about first happens in 1958 in Paris at Gallery Iris Claire. And what Klein believes is that really his job as an artist is to transfer a sensibility from the artist to the viewer, transfer a feeling. The canvas, the paint on the canvas, all the physical manifestation is actually an imperfect medium for doing that. These pure blue things that he makes is pretty good. Like it's a pretty good like conductor of um, of sentiment, of sensibility, but it's not perfect. The dream would be that there's just some kind of setup and the viewer just gets a download of all the feelings that I want them to get. And then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we're done. So this is how he attempts to do it in 1958. Is everyone come to the gallery? Everybody knows him. This is the hotshot superstar blue painting guy. We're going to go see his new show. All right, you go, you come, you see the windows are blocked out. They're blocked out with his trademark International Klein blue. There's a blue curtain here. You would walk in, and that handsome and charming gentleman would hand you a blue cocktail, and you'd walk into the gallery, and there was nothing there. And Klein insisted that there was no need for anything physical there. This room was infused with the sensibility of the color blue. He'd almost like through witchcraft just impregnated the air with this idea, and a viewer could access it through osmosis. It's almost kind of witchy. And that was it. So this was his invisible artwork, an idea that sounds almost sophomoric now, but at the time, that was a pretty man, some radical stuff. But Klein always understood that art has to have a commodity form. It is one of the ways that we understand a thing to be fine art. One of the reasons why, a painting of a sunset is fine art, and a sunset is not. I mean, according to most functional definitions, is that you can buy the painting of the sunset. An artist has to have a commodity form, and not only is that a necessary vulgar feature of an artwork, there actually is kind of an emotional attachment that comes there. There's an emotional attachment that happens when we buy something and when we own it. It actually does mean something. It's not just a necessary evil. So he had these numbered receipts that he would give out to people who bought his invisible artworks. Now, this is interesting to me. All right, because this is actually I think kind of the opposite of what um, this is it feels like I shouldn't say it's the opposite. There's a meaningful difference between this, I think, and Solowitz certificates, in that he is not saying that this certificate is the artwork. It is simply a token that points to something else, and that something else still matters. That's the difference between Solowitz's idea of ownership and Yves Klein's idea of ownership. Okay, when you buy the Solowit certificate, you go ahead, you get the museum installers to do the drawing. They follow instructions, like it's fine. But when Yves Klein was selling you this receipt, he's like, no, there is a certain volume of emotional and spiritual and intellectual space somewhere in the world, and you own it. This is really specific. It matters. He cares about this a lot. That was it's it's such a dumb difference if you're like home at Thanksgiving trying to explain this to like your mom or dad after like your first semester of grad school, but it really matters. And this is interesting to me. And in this somewhere I find some connection to people wanting to own these bitcoins. People want to own these bitcoins, and these bitcoins do have value. And the value of Bitcoin famously is not tethered to any physical or material referent here in our mortal plane. The value of a Bitcoin is a precise measurement of the amount of belief in Bitcoin that exists in a given moment. Or at least that used to be the case. I mean, you could argue that it was the case at one point, way back in the day, and that it's not anymore, and that's all fine. So this is really interesting to me. And I get this idea that Yves Klein kind of is a really good precedent and analog for tokenization. Like this was at a time in 2017, it wasn't just Bitcoin that was going on. People were, there was this boom of something called initial coin offerings, where companies, startups, almost all of them scams. And when I say almost all of them, I mean there's like maybe one that ended up not being a scam. They were creating their own tokens on the Ethereum blockchain, insisting that these referred to some kind of company. Like these had user would denote, maybe they would denote some kind of ownership of some kind of company like TBB, yet to come. And this was a huge boom. Everyone was buying them. This became like kind of a new way to kind of bootstrap your company. And so I actually began this project very skeptical of not just that practice, but also of Yves Klein, right? I was like, oh, okay, this crypto scam sounds a little bit like a conceptual art scam. And I spent a lot of time, I think, being embedded in crypto culture, and researching Yves Klein. And I came out with very different opinions, and certainly very different opinions on Yves Klein, who, like, spoiler alert, but I think by the end of my research on him, I came to the conclusion, like without a doubt, that this was one of the most serious um, and sincere, artists that I'd ever encountered or read about. But anyway, to establish that I think that there's some kind of that this cryptocurrency gives us a way to understand Eve Klein, and that Eve Klein gives us a way to understand these tokens. I go through the very simple exercise of translating all of the rules for the transaction of Klein's immaterial zones to the blockchain by writing a Solidity smart contract. Klein was fairly fastidious in regulating how these receipts and these immaterial artworks could be transferred. There were a lot of rules for them. That was very good for me. As somebody who wrote down a lot of rules in plain French, I guess, means that I can pretty much directly translate those to Solidity programming language. Some of these features were, how much each edition had to sell for. And most significant one, what was kind of a minor annoyance at the time and turned out to be kind of an important thing to notice and copy, is that each one was numbered. And remember how I said it was important to Klein that no, like your certificate means there is a specific volume of idea and nothingness and emotion and spirituality out there. That meant all the tokens had to be numbered, and the numbers that everyone owned had to be recorded and could never change. So lo and behold, I end up sort of creating a very crude and very early non-fungible token. And this was, yeah, and this, I don't know, that ended up being a good thing to do, I guess. That worked out pretty well. It would be exhibited like this, where I would have display these empty, like kind of empty digital spaces, right? Like these white screens, which was actually like a URL you could go to, and then a sort of hardware wallet that would contain one IKB token. IKB was kind of the token symbol for what I then called, unique and indivisible tokens, but then would a few years later come to be known as non-fungible tokens. And that was it. And that was, I think, for me, look, I did this in 2017. I was really excited about it. In fact, I was so excited about that. The other thing I did, this also turned out to be a smart thing to do, is that I wrote a 33-page essay about why I did this, and a 33-page essay that outlined the history of Bitcoin, the history of Ethereum, and the history of Eve Klein's zones of immaterial pictorial sensibility, because I felt it was really important to. Um, because it's important to be accountable to your ideas. It's like in the earlier piece I was showing, and I was just so excited. All these ideas and all these worlds of ideas were now accessible to me, and I was throwing everything out. But here, like, I've really chosen a focus. I've chosen one really hyper specific focus, and I'm dialing in on it. And I wanted to write an essay because, first of all, it forced me to sharpen my focus and be concise in what I was doing. Um, and like I think as an artist, you got to be accountable a little bit, which means like a little bit of calling your shot. There's a fine line between ruining the joke by explaining it too much, but then the kind of other end of the spectrum is like you just kind of like do a whole bunch of stuff and like wait for like somebody else to kind of tell you what you were doing. Just kind of a valid way to do things, but I like that precision. So yeah, this was the piece where I put it all together, and I talked about when I was making this solo wit piece, the final thing that I was just starting to develop in that piece, but I didn't have control of, was understanding that I could create these systems, and then these systems could exist kind of outside of me, outside of a gallery. They could be stress tested in multiple like kind of iterations. And now I'd made this, this was like a system for the transaction of these invisible artworks, and it could run without me, and that's really cool. Uh, when I was making this artwork, I did a lot of research on, other artists who've tried to create economic systems, or I mean, it might even be a stretch to call them economic systems, just created different like modes and methods of transaction for their artwork. And if I can be honest, one of the problems I would have with them is like a lot of them, like they're cute, like they're cute little ideas, but they don't exist outside the walls of the gallery. And like the gallery is the safest and probably least authentic space to do some kind of social experiment, and all economics experiments are like social experiments. And it was exciting. This one existed kind of outside of there. And so I did this in 2017, and nothing happened, right? Like nobody cared. I thought this was a really interesting way to kind of teach the art world about crypto. Not that I wanted to be a crypto evangelist or anything, but just there was this technology, and there's a really interesting symmetry between that and the history of conceptual art. Nothing happened, but I think by like 3 years later, I kind of made my peace with it. That although it never took off, like that it was my best work. Like it was a tight system that had a specific thesis, and it used code to talk about how this new technology was returning us to an understanding of value that had existed 60 years prior. And I was quite happy with that, and I was quite proud of that. Yeah, and then like some weirdo sold a friggin' NFT at Christie's for like $69 million, and it ended up being like important. I shouldn't say important. It ended up being, I don't know, like noteworthy, that I'd done this thing. And that was cool. But like the important thing was that I don't know, I'd made my I kind of before that I decided that it was my best work up to that point. Okay, super quick, because I don't want to eat up all the time. Where does that go from there? Because this is supposed to be what was the breakthrough artwork, was the iconic artwork, and what am I working on right now? Systems, systems, systems. So you know how at the beginning of this I said, oh, it was okay to, not actually be pretty bad at coding as long as I could think about what it meant, as long as I could think about what software, as long as I could think about the impact that the medium was having on society and the ways that it held a mirror to humanity. It's great, still true, very true, very true. But the cherry on top, like next level, is when actually got better at it, instead of just finding analogies between, oh, this system and that system, I could start to kind of create systems like whole cloth. And that's what I became interested to do. And if you kind of get good enough at coding, like you can make video games. And again, like I say, like I'm just like okay at it, but I can hack together a video game in Unity. And I love to make a video game because, as you can probably tell from how I presented these last two pieces and what my motivation and inspiration for them was, I see the world as a series of systems, of social systems and moral systems and economic systems. And these are not like systems that are on auto run, right? There are powerful forces that kind of have their hands on the levers, and they're manipulating these systems all around us all the time. And they're doing it in a way with such kind of subtlety, or at a level so far, kind of above us or below what we look at, that those changes to the systems are often invisible to us. And a game is a cool way of making almost like a cartoonist's version of a life system. And that's what I'm trying to do. So this was, one of the games that I've made since I kind of made my digital zones piece. It's a game called Boys of Summer. Um, and then this game is designed to look like a baseball management simulation. And it's cool. And like programming a baseball management simulation is really fun. It was probably, I mean, it'd be an exaggeration to say like, fantasy baseball is one of the first uses of computers, but I would say that was really early. We love using computers to calculate statistics about baseball. And so it's no surprise that actually baseball was kind of one of the first sports that was really transformed by the ways that people were accessing data, manipulating data, and analyzing and interpreting data. And then there was a period of time where baseball became very, very boring because it was basically a bunch of people just moving spreadsheets around. Baseball then stayed boring until the Toronto Blue Jays made the 2025 World Series. But there's a long period where baseball was just statistics and numbers before the Blue Jays saved it. And so, anyway, that just was a pretty good analogy, I think, for the quantification of our lives and the ways that we have all become data sets, and those data sets become used to manipulate us, often manipulate us into providing more data for the people who profit from our data. And so, making a game allows me to not just kind of make an artwork that comments on, like, hey, look at that over there, and look at that over there, and you see how they're the same. When I make a game, I can actually like make a little system that incorporates both of those ideas, and I can trap a person inside it. And I can trap a person inside it just long enough to kind of open up a curtain and let them see how that system is working and how it's manipulating them. I can start to, once again, it's all about control over the parts that are invisible and the parts that are invisible, or the parts that are invisible and the parts that are visible, and modulating those, right? And choosing the right times to do the reveal. So that's how I'm making super short. That's what I'm doing now. It's video games. For me, it's a really natural evolution of the stuff that I've been doing, because it is just systems, and you get to do all the other fun stuff. If you like making code, then you probably like making using computers to make things look nice, and sound nice and things like that. You get to do all that, but you get to make a system, you get to trap a person inside of it. And that's a very cool thing to do. And yeah, that's kind of that's where I'm going to throw back to Lauren and open up a conversation.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Um, all right. Let me just, I decided not to write questions in advance and just note them as they came.
No, that's
So like
great.
I just need a moment to kind of organize my thoughts here. I think I'm going to kind of start with this. I'm just going to ask them in the order that I'm curious to know.
Yeah.
Um, I think the conceptualism that runs through your practice is really exciting, and the way that it takes a different form in each project is really appealing to me. You said something early on, I think moving from your kind of breakout project to the next one about learning how to be concise and learning how to edit. And I think about that in terms of kind of the elegance of the conceptual work that we see in the second project. But I'm wondering, could you say a little bit more about like how do you think about that? How do you figure out what to edit, or how do you know when like you're kind of you've hit that sweet spot?
Well, one of the nice things about it is it's funny. Like I've always talked about in this talk, and I think most of the times when like code-based artists talk about coding, we're often talking about coding as a means to an end, right? To produce this output or to create this cool piece of software, and then the software does this. But and I'm going to use the word like quite literally, like as a practice, like as just a thing you do, as a hobby, it actually kind of it's really good at training us for this conciseness, isn't it? Because it's like very early on in your career as a coder, like you learn fewer lines of code is better. And you learn that okay, like commenting your code is good, but the code that is so concise that it doesn't need a comment line is better. Like that's the best. Wow, what a cool way to instill those values. So you get a little bit of that just by just by doing it. And maybe that's where a little bit of it comes in. But no, it just comes to like um I don't know how I don't know. I learned, and I don't know whether it's because I got like some critiques where I got called out on some stuff, or just my tastes evolved. And as you get older, like your tastes do evolve, and you realize like kind of what you like about other work and what you like about your own work and what you don't like about your own work. I've just learned that like one idea explored from many different angles, right, is better than shooting off into messily into a whole bunch of ideas because um yeah, and I don't know where that comes from. I can just say it's like maturity and experience out there in the world, and also it's my taste, and it's my taste specifically as pertains to myself because there are big sloppy maximalist projects out there that I do like. I don't know. It's just I just know that I don't work best in that way.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I mean, maybe following on this line of taste or kind of intuition about your own practice, I was wondering if you could talk a little more about the visual language of the projects that you're showing, because it felt like there's quite a range of things, and that often you're kind of um, using or drawing on language of things that you're referencing, whether that's the art historical context or something like IKEA. Um,
Sure.
so yeah,
So
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, it's a great question because there really is a progression in between what I've talked about. And so I guess I should be honest. It took me a long time to learn how to make things that look nice. And I really enjoy things that look nice. Like that is not like I feel like that's not a trivial thing. I love aesthetics and I love them more as I get older. I love aesthetics more as I like take art more seriously. I was fortunate in the beginning, right? That, like I said, one of the first thing that I want to do when I have a new technology is test it out against, art historical ideas. And boy, I was pretty lucky that the artists that I was naturally drawn to were artists with easy to imitate styles. Like it's pretty easy to ape a Saluit aesthetic. Like it's the whole it's designed to be easily replicable. That was the whole point. I was really lucky, and then with Eve Klein, it's just like there's literally nothing there. Let's choose a blue font, like, and we got it. So I should be honest. Did I have aesthetic tastes that went there? Maybe a little bit, but not entirely. I was interested in the idea. The ideas were bang on. Like they were the for me, they were the right ideas to be exploring. I learned a lot through them. I do believe they were the right ideas to put up against these trends that we're having that were happening in tech and society. And it was just convenient that a relatively unskilled aestheticist like myself could easily do them. But then, the technical proficiency came in, and it became more and more important for me to have my own aesthetic style. And it also just became a way of expressing myself through code. So, like the piece that I have, up on the screen right now, I'm just kind of have running in background. Um, that's just a nice little corner of my artistic practice that I can kind of duck into when the ideas are getting too heavy, and you develop a style, and I like to have it. And that style, you also kind of, for me, I needed to be very confident about what my conceptual values were, to make sure that I felt like I was expressing that in their like in the aesthetic style. Like, so this is very much about like the parts of this aesthetic style that are scamorphic are really deliberately so, and very like intentionally kind of clashy with other elements. A lot of my aesthetic style is determined by the technological limitations that I give myself, for ideological reasons. Like, it's important to me that all my work can run on the web. Like, it has to run on WebGL. So therefore, like, guess what? Like, I'm not making like photorealistic ray traced imagery. Like, that's just not going to work. It's more important to me that my art can be seen and experienced by anybody for free, than it is that it has like perfect reflections in like a puddle on a street corner. So I build out of that, and that's kind of where that comes from. But these last 5 years have been the first time that I've actually been able to slowly develop an aesthetic identity and style, because I no longer feel like I have to test these ideas against other people's practices, which necessitates adopting someone else's aesthetic style. And it's the first time that I've really been proficient enough in my medium, like in my technique, to feel like I'm expressing myself. So for those are the two kind of reasons why it evolves the way it does.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I mean, maybe building on that what you just said about kind of being proficient enough in the technology to take it in the place that you want visually. I really liked how you said early on, I think maybe you opened with this, that the job of, and sorry if I misquote you, but the job of being an artist is not to be the best at a medium, but it's to look at the medium and understand the way it's transforming society. Um, I really love that idea. And you also said uh there's something to proficiency, or to, I think what I was getting from seeing your talk is that it seems to, in your practice, that it is about using the tools or having some knowledge of it as well. If not, although you said you're not striving to be the best at it necessarily. But I
No,
guess the question is like, how do you know, where do you find that line for yourself and how much to know? Like, when do you say this is how much I would invest in learning the technology versus just getting going making something?
right. So for me, like there are two phases I think that have happened in my career. Right. First is the phase where you have an idea for a project, and like you gotta learn just enough to get this thing out in the world. Right. You have an idea that there is like a technological pathway to get this vision in your head out in the world, and you just cram to be like, and you might learn how to do things in the wrong way, like you learn things in the wrong order, you do all the tutorials backwards and upside down and messed up, but you get there, and it's an awesome way to just like force feed the knowledge, and you get to like kind of good enough proficiency. And that's what I would do, I mean, really, like, early in my career. Um and and it was an awesome thing to do. And then I get to the point later on, as I get older, where it really is, it's just learning for like the sake of learning and enjoying. And I actually kind of do the opposite now. Like, now when I start a new project, before I let myself do a new project, like I'll do like a week long tutorial series on just something random. Like it might be on like HLSL, it might be on fluid simulation, it might be on UI design, and I'll do it like just for the sake of like starting to like exercise some muscles, and maybe getting some inspiration from just from like the material itself. And I like to do that, but it's a total inversion of how I used to do things. I really do believe that like the technological proficiency, it's not the prerequisite. It's a really, really nice to have. I think your ceiling goes up a lot the more technologically proficient you are, but the baseline of what art is being reflexive and being thoughtful about it. It's one of the ways that I make like a distinction between the technologist and the artist. And I say that not to like denigrate either profession. They're both good professions, but like it was just if you're the area of interest for me, and I mean it's funny, and I'm glad I'm talking to you about this because you, I think, are like the number one artist in the tech field who's like this. Your area of inquiry kind of always begins and ends at a human being. That's what it always feels like to me. And that's like if you're doing that, it's a really good indication that you've made a work of art and not a widget, right? Or a tech demo. And there's going to be a reflection, right? The idea is going to start with a human and bounce off the technology and then come back to the human, right? And you can do that with almost any layer of technological proficiency. And as you get better at it, then oh man, you just got so many new cheap tricks to do that. It's
Mhm.
great.
Um, yeah, I love that answer. I think it's really interesting. Like I think that, or when I'm asked a similar question, I always think like it's probably different for every artist. That you have to kind of find that line for yourself of how much to engage. But I always like hearing how other people think about it. Um, Request from Casey Reese to stop screen sharing. So I think that in the recording we
Oh,
have a better
okay,
recording of your face, giving your
got it.
thoughtful
Okay.
responses here. Thank you. Okay, so there's not a lot of time and I have a lot of questions. I'll try to get two more in at least. I really appreciated this idea of testing against historic artistic practices. You kind of drew that line through all your work, even when I think maybe the earlier projects it was very explicit. But I feel like that thread's always in there. So, uh, I have a couple questions on this. The first one is it do you feel it's necessary for people to have an understanding of art history to kind of understand your work? And like, how does this square with the fact that maybe when you're working in digital art space today, there's a lot of people that are very new to art and may
Mhm.
not have that context.
So the answer is that, that early work that I showed, is it necessary to have an understanding of art history? The answer is like yes, eventually. This was the interesting thing that happened, right? I mean, eventually, like you do, because the thesis of the artwork is here's thing A, here is thing B. The intelligent part is the interesting part of it is how these oh my good the ways that these things fit together or don't fit together or contradict each other, and you can't do that if you don't have knowledge of thing B, right? Like it takes two to tango. What I never anticipated was the extent that an artwork like this can be a gateway and an invitation for a person who didn't know about thing B. And I say this was, I mean, when I created, Digital Zones in 2017, I thought it was to some degree like a way to introduce this economic phenomenon to the art world and explain this economic phenomenon to art people. And it didn't work. They just weren't that interested. I mean, maybe they weren't that interested, or maybe I just didn't have that kind of reach or anything like that. I don't know. But then in 2021, there were like a number of people who were interested in like the economic side of this, who wanted to learn about conceptual art and Yves Klein, and did, like, through that project and through that paper. And that blew me away and it really humbled me. And so, and no, like don't get me wrong, there are also people who like never got it, and they carried, oh, there's a token and it's a token, so I'm going to buy it and it's blah blah blah. And no, and so those people didn't get it. They didn't. But there were a lot of people who started out in that position, ended up having an understanding of the artwork, like an understanding of the history, and enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. That was really cool. So, but eventually, yeah, you did need to have. You didn't need to have the art historical knowledge. But the good news is that it came bundled in. It's part of the package, baby. And now when I make art, I do actually I make um, I think because I've had that exposure to an audience that wasn't coming to my work with an art background, and I was and I've been so genuinely appreciative and humbled by them, by like the curiosity that audience can have and the intelligence that audience can have. It's one of the reasons why I've decoupled my work from like having the art history lesson built in, because I do like because I want to because I want to engage, I want to engage Joe Sixpack and Johnny PlayStation. Like I think that's really cool. I think it's a noble goal for art to have.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I could keep going on every one of these questions and like have a lot of follow-ups, but I'm gonna just go to one last question because I think we're just about out of time. Um, I was curious, so Digital Zones of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility, 2017, I think. How do you think about that in relation to how you've seen blockchain and related technologies play out since then? And then I'm kind of squeezing a second question into it, and you can answer how whatever this you want. But at one point, you also said, "What does it mean that our society produced this?" I think that was in relation to blockchain, but you could ask that question about a lot of technologies today. So,
Mhm.
do you feel overall optimistic? So, any response you have to any of those questions, I'd be
Okay.
curious.
Oh, it's pretty hard to. It's all right. How do I feel about it in the aftermath? Hey, overall, I mean, to be honest, it's like I said, I'm proud of that project. I made my peace with that project kind of after I did it, but I think before it got any attention. And I decided that I was proud of the project as an artwork, and it turned out to be, if I may say, it turned out to be fairly prescient about a lot of things that would end up happening in the world. And like, even if you're lucky, you only get one of those. I'm probably only gonna get one of those. Where you say, I called it. I knew that thing was gonna happen, and I got it time stamped on the blockchain and on GitHub. Wow. So like that's pretty cool. I think that that project was really open ended about both things being either like really meaningful, like and like on an emotional and spiritual level, like that is the work of Eve Klein and like this cryptocurrency phenomenon that was happening. I mean, it left it open ended that either of those things or both of those things could be deeply meaningful and spiritual, or they could both be scams. And that open endedness has proven to be true. Has proven to be true without taking a position either way. Although, like I said, I drew some conclusions about Eve Klein, whatever. Am I optimistic about the future? It's tough. Like I don't want to end on a downer. Uh, so I'll just say it's a tough place. Like technology is being weaponized around us. Um, all the time. And what I get, I think, most bummed out about is not even the obvious ways that technology is being used against us, it's the sneaky ways that it's being used against us. And so I don't want to say that I am optimistic. What I will say is that I do think that art I feel absolutely confident, really, that art is more important than ever. And I don't even necessarily mean art in its form, in the form that we have it now, but like art continuing to evolve. And essentially, just the act of encouraging someone to look at a phenomenon thoughtfully and generously, expecting there to be different facets and different sides and different modes of interpretation to this thing in front of them. Creating those kind of experiences and putting them in front of people, it's more important than it ever has been in my lifetime. I feel great about, I don't know, being part of a culture, a group of people, a group of peers and colleagues who do that. Like all the time. It can feel kind of hopeless sometimes, but I actually know really deep down in my heart of hearts uh, that it's awesome and incredible and valuable, and I'm grateful to do it.
Thank you so much. That's a that's a great ending, and it was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciated the opportunity to hear about your practice and from that kind of line of thought, and also get to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for doing that. Thanks everyone for being here. Let me see if I can share this slide really quickly. Um, a reminder that we're having the final lecture of the series next week. So here's the information if you want to RSVP for that. Um, thank you so much, Mitchell. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. I was honestly just a delight and an honor to be here. Next time, why don't I come down and do it in person because I woke up to snow outside my window this morning. So,
Hell yeah. Sounds great. Cool.
okay,
All
thank you
right.
so
Good night,
much.
everyone.